From the unexplained to the mundane, come join us on a journey to the fringe. Hello and welcome to Journey to the Fringe, where time is an abstract concept, which I guess is just like everywhere else, but I mean it's different, like in another way, I promise. Anyhow, my name is Taylor. I'm here with Chelsea. We are your podcast hosts today, talking about maybe time, as in like time is probably something that takes place in this story, but it might not. I don't know. Chelsea's doing the episode.
At the very least, time is happening.
Oh, good.
While we do this podcast. So boy, were you right. This does include time. And assuming that it's my turn to talk, I'm not even going to introduce this one. I'm sick of introducing, and I'm just going to jump right in. Project Blue Book Case Files. April 24th, 1964, 5:45 p.m. The southern outskirts of Socorro, New Mexico. I'm going to read directly from the statements that were taken from the eyewitnesses in this point. I thought I'd bring like a fresh perspective to it. I'm going to do my best with it by doing that because it's just in point form. Here we're going to read some eyewitness statements from this 5:45 p.m. Not on the actual date of April 24th, but that's where the incident takes place, and I hope you're still following me. Socorro Police Sergeant Lonnie Zamora, who is in his patrol car alone, is chasing a speeding car due south of Socorro, and he hears a roar.
I feel like we've actually alluded to this one quite a few times.
I hope we have, because now's the moment you've been waiting for. He hears a roar and he sees a flame in the sky to the southwest some distance away, possibly a half mile or a mile away. Zamora says he did not pay much attention to the flame, that the sun was too west and it didn't help his vision, and he was wearing green sunglasses over prescription glasses. In interviews with Air Force investigators for Project Blue Book, he goes to some lengths to describe the long, narrow, funnel-shaped bluish-orange flame. He thought there might be some dust at the bottom and attributed it to a windy day. The weather was clear, sunny sky, otherwise just a few clouds scattered over the area. He describes the noise as a roar, not a blast, not like a jet. It changes from high frequency to low frequency and then stops. The roar lasted about 10 seconds, and as he approached on a gravel road, he saw a flame about as long as he heard the sound, flame the same color as best he can recall. The sound distinctly from high to low until it disappeared. He explains that his car windows were down, and Zamora notes no other possible witnesses except possibly the car in front, which he estimates might have heard the noise, not seen the flame, because it would have been behind the brow of the hill from the viewpoint. He's driving, he sees this thing in the distance. He was thinking this was a dynamite shack that had blown up, so he calls off the chase of the speeder, and he drives towards the kerfuffle going on.
I'm curious, was there a dynamite shack in that direction, or is this just like...
There was actually a dynamite shack in that direction, yes. Can you imagine just making it up?
I feel like he's been burned one too many times by a dynamite shack in the past. I gotta be careful on this one.
So Zamora takes his car off-road and he struggles to get his car up a steep hill. He tries one or two times and he's successful on the third attempt, and he notes no further noise. For the next 10 to 15 seconds, he proceeded west, looking for the shack whose precise location he did not recall. So it is precisely in the area of a dynamite shack. I don't know why there's a shack in the middle of the desert holding dynamite, but...
Do we know what a dynamite shack is? Is it a place where they store dynamite, or is it a place where they make dynamite?
I don't know.
I would assume it's stored, but I don't know.
I'm just picturing like a lonely shack in the middle of the desert.
I'm almost picturing
that might
house
say TNT on it.
With dynamite?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was here that he notices a shiny object. Quote from Zamora, to the south about 150 to 200 yards, end quote. And at first he took to be an overturned white car up on the radiator or on the trunk. So it's standing either straight up or on the front of it, I think, is how a radiator would be on a car. There's two people standing outside of what he thinks is this car wreck, one of whom seemed to notice him with some surprise and gave a start. The shiny object was like aluminum. It was whitish against the mesa background, but not chrome, and shaped like the letter O. Having stopped for a couple of seconds, Zamora approached this car, meaning to help, thinking that it was an accident. He speeds over there, and Zamora only caught a brief sighting of the two people in white coveralls beside the car. He recalls nothing special about them. He doesn't recall noting any particular shape, possibly any hats or headgear, just outlines of people basically that he's seeing, and the people appeared normal in shape, but possibly small adults or large kids. Zamora is driving towards the scene, radioing his dispatcher to say he would be out of his car checking the car in the arroyo. He stopped his car, got out, and attended to the radio microphone, which he had dropped. Then he started to approach the object. According to Zamora, he hardly turned around from the car when he heard a roar, and it was not exactly a blast. So as soon as he's approaching this, he hears another roar. Very loud roar, incredibly loud, as close as he was to it. Wasn't like a jet, knows what a jet sounds like. It starts in low frequency quickly, then rose in frequency, higher tone, and in loudness from loud to very loud. So loud. So loud.
Just so we're on the same page, when we're saying roar, we're talking about like a plane or something along those lines. Not that, but also not a bear roar. Not like a bear roar.
Dynamite explode, like a roar. Yeah, not like a dinosaur roar. I'm gonna go with dinosaur. Dinosaur is what I think of.
Okay.
Not lion. Dinosaurs are...
Well, we don't know for sure if dinosaurs roared, but sure.
I feel like I do. I've seen Jurassic Park.
Okay.
The same time as the roar, he sees more flame. This is reminiscent to me of the initial sighting. Flame under the object, what he thought was a car wreck. Object was starting to go straight up, slowly up, and it rose straight up. I feel like that was Dr. Seuss-esque there. The flame was light blue, and at the bottom was sort of orange color from this angle. He saw the side of the object, not end, as first noted. It was difficult to describe the flame for Zamora. He thought from the roar that it might blow up, and that the flame might have come from the underside of the object at the middle, possibly a 4 feet area. Very rough guess from Zamora. I thought it would be fun to read these because they are such in point form. I thought I would challenge myself to read this all legibly to you. He cannot describe the flame further except it was blue and orange, I feel like he was reaching there to add any more detail. No smoke except dust in the immediate area. Mentions dust a lot. Keeping the object in view, he ran behind his car, bumping his leg on the rear fender and dropping his glasses. He continued running northwards away from the object, which was still near the ground. He now gives a more detailed description of the object. Oh, good. Quote, it was oval in shape, smooth, no windows or doors. Noted red lettering of some type. The insignia was about 2.5 feet high and about 2 feet wide, I guess. And it was in the middle of the object. The object still was like an aluminum white. He also noted that the object was still on the ground when the roar started. And Zamora describes how the object took off. After he fell by the car and his glasses fell off, he kept running to the north with the car between him and the object. He glanced back a couple of times and noted the object to rise to about the level of his car, about 20 to 25 feet. What? That can't be right. Cars aren't.
Well, is he not up on like a hill?
Oh, right. Yes, he is on a hill.
I'm assuming the ground isn't flat. Yeah.
Okay, I was just thinking that right, I forgot that detail. Thank you.
They had such tall cars in this place.
I know, I was like, what? A car is not 20 to 25 feet. Yes, he went up a hill. It took, he guesses, about 6 seconds. When the object started to rise and I glanced back, I ran, I guess, about halfway to where I ducked down, about 50 feet from where the car is, just over the edge of the hill. There we go. I guess I had run about 25 feet when I glanced back and saw the object level with the car, and it appeared about directly over the place where it rose from. I was still running and I jumped just over the hill. I stopped because I did not hear the roar. I was scared of the roar and I had planned to continue running down the hill. I turned around toward the object and at the same time put my head toward the ground and covering my face with my arms. Being that there was no roar, I looked up and I saw the object going away from me. It did not come any closer to me. It appeared to go in a straight line and at the same height, possibly 10 to 15 feet from from the ground. It cleared the dynamite shack by about 3 feet. Oh, he found the dynamite shack. That seems convenient that it landed by the dynamite shack.
It is incredibly convenient.
It is so convenient that Zamora knew where the dynamite shack was exactly. The shack was about 8 feet high, and the object was traveling very fast. It seemed to rise up and take off immediately across the country. Zamora went back to his car and contacted the sheriff's office by radio. Quote, I picked up my glasses, I left the sunglasses on the ground, got into the car and radioed to Nep Lopez, radio operator, to look out the window to see if you could see an object. He asked, what is it? I answered, it looks like a balloon. I don't know if he saw it. If Nep looked out the window, which faces north, he couldn't have seen it. I did not tell him at the moment which window to look out of. He watched the object fly away, swiftly but silently and without flame. As I was calling Nep, I could see the object. The object seemed to lift up slowly and to get small in the distance very fast. It seemed to just clear the Box Canyon or 6 Mile Canyon mountain. It disappeared as it went over the mountain. It had no flame whatsoever as it was traveling over the ground and no smoke or noise. Zamora inspected the area and was soon joined by a colleague, Sergeant Chavez, who did not see the object. Zamora gave directions to Nep Lopez on the radio and to Sergeant M.S. Chavez to get there. He went down to where the object had been and he noted that the brush was burning in several places. At that time, I heard Sergeant Chavez, New Mexico State Police at Socorro, calling me on the radio for my location, and I returned to my car, told him he was looking at me. Then Sergeant Chavez came up, asked me what the trouble was because I was sweating, and he told me I was white, very pale. I asked the sergeant to see what I saw, and that was the burning brush. Then Sergeant Chavez and I went to the spot, and Sergeant Chavez pointed out the track. Zamora says that he had noticed that the object had what looked like legs. When I first saw the object, when I thought it might be a car, I saw what appeared to be 4 legs of some type from the object to the ground. At the time, I didn't pay much attention to what it was. I thought it was an accident. I saw the 2 persons. I didn't pay any attention to the 4 legs. The 4 legs were at the bottom of the object, slanting outwards to the ground. The object might have been about 3.5 feet from the ground at the time. I just glanced at it. Zamora tries to account for the disappearance of the 2 people. I think it's interesting that in retrospect, and he thinks about what he was actually seeing, he remembers these details when he first thought it was just a car accident looking like a car that was like straight up and down.
Yeah, that's kind of like the whole thing about from memory, is it can change as it goes.
It can, yes. This does seem to be a fairly recent statement of account from him actually witnessing it from what I saw. So he goes on, quote, from Zamora, can't tell how long I saw the object the second time, the close time when he was like on the hill. Possibly 20 seconds, just a guess, from the time I got out of the car, glanced at the object, ran from the object, jumped over the edge of the hill, then got back in the car and the radio as object disappeared. As my mic fell as I got out of my car at the scene area, I heard about 2 or 3 loud thumps, like someone possibly hammering or shutting a door or doors hard. These thumps were possibly a second or less apart. This was just before the roar. Persons were not seen when I drove to the scene area, just before Sergeant Chavez got to the scene. I got my pen and drew a picture of the insignia on the object. Within hours, word of Zamora's encounter had reached the news. Many people had heard the radio traffic, including a few reporters. Within days, reporters from the Associated Press and the United Press International were in Socorro. Members of Civilian UFO Study Group ARPO were on the scene within 2 days, as were officers representing the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book. Nightcap investigators appeared the following Tuesday. The first nightcap investigator was Ray Stanford, who would later write a detailed booked account on his investigation, which I think he has more than one. That's the whole Lonnie Zamora story from his eyes. I took his actual eyewitness account there of what happened. Do you have any questions about the actual account?
There is nobody else. Like, it's only him, correct?
He's the only one that actually has this up close experience, but there are multiple other witnesses that I'm going to talk about a little bit.
Okay, well that's good. I guess I do have 2 other questions from there. Did they ever follow up on like why did you think it was a dynamite shack exploding.
I don't know that they follow up on it, but the only reason I would imagine that it would be was because he heard a roar and he saw the flames. So I think if you know there's a dynamite shack in the area, which he obviously would have, if he ended up next to the dynamite shack, he obviously
I'm more so
knew
just curious if this is like from previous experience. If he's like, oh yeah, this is kind of in that thing. Because like in my mind, flames are not something that you would associate with dynamite shacks.
I'm just wondering though, like if you knew there was a dynamite shack somewhere and you happen to be driving by where you know it is and you see something similar, maybe it's just, I mean, the first thought he had when he saw like an object that he later recalled having legs was a car accident.
I just find that weird because you don't have to say what you thought it was. You just need to see there's flames. And I had to go inspect it as a police officer. Does that not make sense? In my mind, it kind of almost says I had either an idea that this was going to happen or have had experience with dynamite shacks exploding in the past.
You're very right, but he could just be...
There's a whole other part of the story that is left out of this man's universe.
He could just be saying his thought, giving as detailed as an account as he can, even though it's not necessary for him to be giving that account. But you're right, it didn't need to be in there, yet it is. I feel like if I gave an account of something, I would give my entire thought process at the same time going through it as well.
Can you imagine being the one taking that down? And you're like, yeah, and I saw these flames and I just assumed it was the dynamite shack. I feel like you have to ask a question at that point.
That's a good storyteller though, because he's telling why he got up.
That's a bad investigator that didn't say why.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got stuck on that part. The rest of the story kind of is in the back of my mind. I didn't quite hear the whole thing.
Yeah.
It seems like an odd thing. It's kind of like when most of the time we get to those stories and we say, why didn't you ask about the penis if you're calling it a man? This is kind of like that in my mind. There's a dynamite shack that
maybe he was just waiting for it to like explode one day. I don't know. Obviously it was on his mind. Like it finally blew. That's what that thought process says to me.
Wait, and did he think it was that kind of blue book?
Yeah, blew up. Maybe just logically in his head. I mean, not everybody thinks about things logically the same.
Yeah, and I just need it to be known that that's a bad investigator who did not follow up on that.
Did you have another question?
I'm sorry, I was just too consumed with that. I can't even remember if I did.
That was it, okay. Just the two questions.
I think there was another one, but I just like...
I know, I thought you said you had another
detail.
one. That's fine. This ends up being like one of the most well-documented eyewitness accounts of a UFO. Not only because it was witnessed by a law enforcement officer, another one came and saw other evidence, which would be the sergeant that Zamora called in to come and look as well, just shortly after it happened, and he saw whatever it was that was on fire, and he saw the indents in the sand. I don't know what it was, but it's a desert. I assume it's sand. The indents of like the 4 legs that were on the craft. There were other witnesses, and several primary witnesses emerged to report stages and aspects of the event, which included the craft's approach, in conspicuous flame, and physical evidence left behind immediately afterward. It was, however, Lonnie Zamora, a New Mexico State police officer who was on duty at the time, who came closest to the object and provided the most prolonged and comprehensive account. Like I just said, poorly compared to that, some physical trace evidence was left behind, which was burned vegetation and soil, ground landing impressions, metal scrappings on a broken rock in one of the impressions, and was subsequently observed and analyzed by investigators for the military, law enforcement, and civilian UFO groups.
I'm just curious, could any of that have been associated with, say, a dynamite shack in the area?
Maybe. From my understanding, it was very close by.
Because I don't know how they load dynamite from a shack, or what metal scrapings might come of that. I don't know.
Or why it's even kept in a shack in the middle of the desert. You would think it would be unstable in the heat like that. I don't know anything about dynamite. I don't have a dynamite shack.
This, again, a complete part of the story that was unquestioned by the investigator.
That's true. I want to know more about that dynamite shack. Several independent witnesses reported either an egg-shaped craft or a bluish flame at roughly the same time and in the same area. Some of them within minutes of Zamora's encounter before word of it had spread. So Stanford, the dude who investigated this and wrote a book, right? Pretty sure, yeah. He wrote of a number of corroborating witnesses in his books, including 2 tourists named Paul Keiss and Larry Kratzer, who were approaching Socorro in the car from the southwest, less than a mile from the landing site. I wonder if this is the speeding car Zamora was trying to catch. They apparently witnessed either the landing or takeoff and reported seeing the flame and brownish dust being kicked up. Their story was reported in the Dubuque, Iowa Telegraph Herald a few days after their return, of which I will not be reading here. Do your own research. Do you find it strange? Most UFO encounters have like an otherworldly feel to them, like it's something our aircraft couldn't do. But this one kind of just has like...
Yeah, it feels like it could just be high military tech that has not been...
I don't even know that it would be high military tech if it's starting Russian stuff on fire.
No, that's true, but like military tech just doesn't generally start fires like that.
Yeah, it seems like even less technically savvy.
I don't think it's less technically savvy. I think they're testing something that didn't work the way they were anticipating, maybe.
Yeah, okay, I could get behind that. Yeah, that's the feel that I'm getting from it so far, even though I'm a big fan of this case. It's no Travis Walton, though, I will tell you that much. So, another witness was a family of 5 who were tourists from Colorado headed north, also saw the oval-shaped object as it approached Socorro at a very low altitude, going east to west just south of town. It passed directly over their car, only a few feet above it, and after the encounter, the tourists stopped for gas in Socorro. Their identity was never discovered, but the story was learned from the service station operator, Opal Grinder, who reported the incident at the time and later signed an affidavit in 1967. According to Grinder, the husband told him, "Your aircraft sure fly low around here," and that the object almost took the roof of their car off. The man thought it was in trouble since it came down west of the highway instead of the nearby airport to the south. He saw the police car headed up the hill towards it and he thought to render assistance. According to Stanford, another witness called an Albuquerque television station around 5:30 p.m. to report an oval object at low altitude traveling slowly south towards Socorro. This report was also brought up by KSRC Socorro radio newsman Walter Schroed when he interviewed Zamora on the radio the next day. Zamora said he hadn't heard of the report. Schroed thought that this was likely the same object that Zamora encountered only 20 minutes later and helped corroborate his report. Several other stories appeared in New Mexico newspapers in succeeding days of other sightings of oval-shaped objects, including another landing case with burned soil near La Madera in northern New Mexico, also similar to the Socorro incident. The FBI report on the La Madera case further noted the witness reporting a blue-white flame associated with the object, 4 rectangular, I don't know what 4 rectangular means, maybe landing gears, V-shaped landing marks, and several circle marks about 4 inches in diameter. Stanford also noted there was a large number of oral witnesses to the object's loud roar during takeoff and landing. One member of the Socorro Sheriff's Office told him that hundreds of persons on the south side of town had heard it. Stanford said he personally spoke to 2 women who heard the roar just before 6 p.m., and they said there were 2 distinct roars, maybe a minute or so apart.
I just have to add that that's weird that one is corroborated probably the most, and that's probably like the least attached to a UFO sighting of the things that have happened that he's saying happened, which really makes me believe that it's something more terrestrial made.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to just have regular noises happen around me and me consistently say that it's a UFO. You would think for myself that would happen way more than it actually does. I don't know that I've ever, well, sometimes I'm like, hey, is that a UFO? But it's joking in most cases. I wouldn't just attribute a loud roar to a UFO, I don't think. 'Cause you could hear that just in regular life.
Yeah,
unless
very
it's a
easily.
dinosaur roar.
Yeah, it really depends what we're talking about for roars, and maybe this very distinct roar. Because you're not going to hear a dinosaur roar in everyday life unless you're watching Jurassic Park, as we talked about earlier.
That one I for sure would be like someone's watching Jurassic Park, or there's a T-Rex in the backyard.
But
it's
like
probably the first one.
a low passing plane, you're going to hear a roar from.
Yeah.
But he did say
or
it also.
The local dynamite shack blowing up.
Again,
As
they
it
did
does.
not follow that line of questioning, so we cannot confirm nor deny that part. But he also did say it was distinctly different from a plane. So I don't know how to explain that one. It's just like, that's not something, I don't think we've ever actually brought up the sound of a UFO before this one.
Most people will say that there isn't a sound.
Yeah,
or it's
exactly.
the sound of Teslas. If it's my head, that's what a UFO sounds like.
Yeah, well, in my mind, it's the sound of, what is that, wax paper on a comb in that one episode of The Simpsons?
It's the same thing as a Tesla.
Yeah,
Pretty
yeah.
sure. That's the same sound.
That's where, yeah, that's
that's where Tesla got
Elon
it.
Musk is incredibly uncreative, so he just stole it.
Yeah, he had the...
And sorry, by he, I mean people he paid to do it did it.
He was like, I kind of wanted to sound like this, the wax paper over the comb, and then they did it. Good job, Elon Musk. No. Is that the right name?
Sure, why not?
Nikola Tesla? Yeah, Elon Musk. In addition to the above witnesses, Stanford said there were 3 other persons who called the police dispatcher immediately following the incident. I do love the guy that called the news. Like, that's like seeing something, hearing a big roar and being like, I'm going to call global news.
Yeah, which
like,
actually does
CNN.
happen. We've talked about. Have we talked about the horn sound? I can't remember. We might have a mini on it.
We've talked about a lot of stuff now.
I think we've talked about it in a mini.
Like a car horn?
No, like a trumpet horn. And there'll be like, or the humming
come
one.
up briefly, I believe.
Yeah, I think the hums come up too, but never a roar.
Yeah. Never a roar. In October 2009, Stanford first publicly revealed that Sergeant Chavez, the first policeman to provide backup for Zamora, had privately confided to fellow police officers that he too had seen the object rapidly departing to the west over the mountains as he approached the site. In various interviews, Zamora somewhat confirmed the possibility, saying Chavez was at the scene within about 2 minutes after he radioed him for backup. That is excellent service from his superior. The object was still about a couple of moments up there when he had arrived, and if Chavez had just paid attention, he would have seen it flying off towards the mountains. However, in public statement, Chavez maintained that he arrived too late to see the object. When Chavez first arrived at Zamora's position where the object had departed, he also noted that burnt bushes were still smoldering and Zamora appeared to be in the state of shock. Multiple policemen arrived soon after to help investigate, including Ted Jordan and James Lucky. All noted fresh burning at the site. Lucky and Chavez were quoted in the Socorro newspaper saying that clumps of grass and burned greasewood bushes were still hot when they arrived. Chavez was also quoted saying that the dry grass was still smoldering, as were the greasewood plants. Zamora was likewise quoted about the green bush, burned bare by exhaust heat. Okay, that's a relatable statement, I feel like at this point. Down to earth, matter of fact. And that it was still smoking several minutes after the craft's departure. The FBI report written by the agent on the scene within 2 hours similarly reported that all first responders noted 4 irregularly shaped smoldering areas. Chavez was again quoted in an Air Force report written 2 days later about smoking brush. Chavez then went to the area where the craft or thing was supposedly sighted and found 4 fresh indentations in the ground and several charred and burned bushes. Smoke appeared to come from the bush, and he assumed it was burning. However, no coals were visible, and the charred portions of the bush were cold to the touch. Chavez was further reported securing the area and scouring the ground looking for the presence of other human activity. He could find no other tire tracks besides Zamora's and was adamant that there was no other track activity, footprints, or other marks in the area. In addition, Chavez was also quoted in the report saying that the indentations appeared to be new. He stated that the marks were definitely fresh and the dirt showed evidence of dew or moisture. Similarly, several policemen later told Stanford that whatever had produced the rectangular, wedge-shaped landing traces appeared to have penetrated into the moist subsoil, as the bottoms of the traces were moist for several hours, suggesting that the traces were freshly made. Hynek also, Hynek comes in, Jay Allen. He also commented on the freshness of the soil impressions in a letter to astronomer Donald Menzel. Quote, I have the word of 9 witnesses who saw the marks within hours of the incident, who tell me the center of the marks were moist as though the topsoil had been freshly pushed aside. End quote. The FBI investigator also observed that the rectangular marks seemed to have been made by an object going into the earth at an angle from a center line, pushing some earth to the far side. Also observed were...
I just want to make sure there was no burn mark in the middle of these, like, 4 marks, right?
No, it doesn't seem like there was.
No, there was just fire everywhere, but there's no burn mark on the ground, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, some of the details seem kind of weird about it. Like, it looks burned but cold to the touch when they're there, like, super soon. Also observed were 3 circular marks in the earth, which were small, approximately 4 inches in diameter, and penetrated in the sandy earth approximately 1/8 of an inch. Those are the other witnesses of what was going on. Witnesses that corroborated what Lonnie Zamora saw, as well as witnesses that saw the aftermath directly after what Lonnie Zamora had witnessed. Next, I go into the fact that it was immediately investigated by the U.S. Army, the U.S. Air Force, and the FBI, and received considerable coverage in the mass media. It blew up for Zamora. I know when I was just talking, he had already been giving statements and talking to the media like the next day. So the evening of the encounter, Army Captain Richard T. Holder, then the senior officer at White Sands, as the higher ranking officer, had gone home for the weekend, and FBI agent Arthur Burns Jr. together interviewed Zamora. I don't know why we have to know that he had gone home for the weekend.
We need to know why they dropped the ball on the dynamite shack.
I don't think that it'll ever come up. Reasons remain unclear. The FBI asked that their presence at the scene be kept quiet. Zamora speculated that the object was some kind of newly developed craft being tested at White Sands Missile Range or the nearby Holloman Air Force Base. Holder shot down this idea and was later quoted in a Socorro newspaper saying that there was in military custody no object that would compare to the object described, which is a super weird thing to say. There was no known firing mission in progress at the time of the occurrence and would produce the conditions reported. I think with that statement right there, I'm convinced that it was the Air Force. What do you think? He would be like, yeah, we were testing top secret stuff. And if they were, wouldn't it be like, no, we don't own anything that would do that?
If they were testing top secret stuff, they would have got Doty on it. He was, never mind, he's not born yet, or at least he's very young.
Doty would have been like, it for sure was a UFO. Here's some documents.
I'll even get it to show up again.
Oh yeah, trust me. After interviewing Zamora, Holder and several military police officers went to the scene. Using flashlights, they cordoned off the site, took measurements, and took samples of the sand and the scorched bushes. The claim of fused sand being recovered from the landing site was for some time unsubstantiated. Even Hynek said he had not heard such rumors during the investigation. The next morning, a Sunday, Holder took a telephone call from a colonel at the Joint Chiefs of Staff. As a young captain, Holder was surprised and nervous to speak to such an important high-ranking officer. At the colonel's command, Holder gave a report of his investigation over a secure scrambled line. Even years later, Holder would wonder about such important U.S. military officials. Why in the world were they so interested? So, astronomer J. Allen Hynek, he was an astronomer?
Physicist / astronomer, yeah.
Blue Book's consultant arrived in Socorro on Tuesday, April 28th. He met with Zamora and Chavez and interviewed them about the encounter. Hynek and Air Force Major Hector Quintanilla initially thought the sighting might be explained as a test of lunar excursion module. Though after some investigation, Hynek determined that this could be definitely ruled out as an explanation for what Zamora saw. In a memorandum, Hynek wrote that Zamora and Chavez were very anti-AF Air Force. Now we know that as fuck. The Air Force was suggesting that the affair was a hoax, but Zamora was pretty sore at being regarded as a romancer, and it took over half an hour for Hynek to thaw him out and hear the account from the only eyewitness. Hynek also wrote that the AF is in a spot over Socorro. They were also suggesting that the encounter could be attributed to Zamora having seen an unidentified military craft, though no craft could be matched to Zamora's report. Hynek agreed with many others that this explanation won't go down as plausible. Hynek further wrote, I think this case case may be the Rosetta Stone. There's never been a strong case with so unimpeachable a witness.
I don't understand why it would be a Rosetta Stone. Because the Rosetta Stone is like how you translate between languages. They didn't have a way to translate to Egyptian, but they found the Rosetta Stone, which was Egyptian to Greek.
I think that they are looking for a different word other than Rosetta Stone. Maybe like
maybe the Antikythera device, which is like they found the computer in the water.
Or maybe they found the smoking gun, maybe?
Smoking gun? You know what? It's actually hard to find one where you could say it's like one good witness made the entire case.
Also noting his growing frustration with Blue Book, Hynek wrote, "The AF doesn't know what science is." End quote. I hope I read that dramatic enough. It was one of the cases that helped persuade astronomer J. Allen Hynek, one of the primary investigators for the Air Force, that some UFO reports represented an intriguing mystery. After extensive investigation, Project Blue Book was unable to come up with a conventional explanation for the Zamora encounter and listed the case as unknown.
I mean, that's fair, because we're speculating that's just like technology of the military that hasn't been disclosed at that point.
Yeah.
Which would be unknown.
Yeah, that's seeming likely to me, but let's see what else they have to say about this. So the next thing we're going to look at is the fused sand that was mentioned very briefly because they said that it didn't really come up or nobody else had heard about it. So in 1968, physicist and UFO researcher James E. McDonald located Mary G. Mays, who asserted that when she was a University of New Mexico doctoral student in radiation biology, she has been asked to analyze plant material from the Socorro site. Afterwards, she was to turn in all records and samples and heard no more about it. When interviewed by McDonald, Mays reported that she and two others had worked on studying physical evidence from the Socorro site, but she could not remember the names of the others. According to Mays, she had examined the site the day after the event and had gathered plant samples for analysis. Mays later determined that the plants, which had allegedly been burnt by the UFO's flames, were unusually completely dried out. Mays also found no evidence of radiation.
I just want to make sure. She studied both the burnt ones and normal plants that weren't burnt, correct?
Yes. I mean, it doesn't specifically say that.
I also feel like it's kind of weird for a radiologist to make a comment on how like dried out it is.
The same as because, oh yeah, here's the fused sand. I was like, that hasn't come out yet, but it's coming out soon. She also found no evidence of radiation, but found two organic substances she was unable to identify. Mays also reported to McDonald an area of apparently fused sand, where the sand had taken on a glassy appearance, near where the object had allegedly landed and then departed. The area of glassy sand was roughly triangular, measuring about 25 to 30 inches. At its widest, though it gradually tapered down to about 1 inch wide, it seemed about a quarter of an inch thick. Mays thought the glassy areas looked as if a hot jet hit it. Mays said she would investigate to determine the other people who investigated the site, but McDonald's files gave no indication she ever contacted him about the object. Now, I'm just gonna bring it up quickly here. I can't recall if it had to do with the fused sand, or there was also mention of on a rock there was a little bit of metal that they found.
Yeah, there were shavings found.
Yeah, my notes have left this out miraculously, but they do send this off for testing. The original scientist that gets a hold of it and analyzes it does say that it's not anything that could be found here on Earth. They then take the sample for further analysis because it came back as unknown. They actually send it off to NASA and it's never seen again. When it was followed up on to see where this sample had gone, they replied the other guy is fired, he wasn't doing his job properly, and they don't know where the samples went. Just something to mention in there that happened alongside of this, and I don't know if I missed it because it wasn't the fused sand and it was in fact the metal samples.
I find those comments very weird from the scientist who was analyzing the radiation. Like, that's what she was hired for, correct?
That there was no radiation, but the plants were very dried out. Maybe.
And there was fused sand. That just seems like weird comments from her. Like, that's not her specialty. Why are you commenting on that?
You wouldn't be looking at that. I wouldn't be looking for fused sand if I was literally there, because I wouldn't know to look for
If they say, like, hey, check this place out with a Geiger counter, are you going to say, I didn't find anything, but there's some few sand over there? That just seems odd.
Unless that's a part of her job. I don't know. What do radiologists do?
That's kind of what I assumed. I don't know. Let's do a...
Maybe they do look for few sand as well as radiation. Does it indicate radiation, maybe? No, it wouldn't. It would just...
That would not. No,
hot.
That would indicate, like, a hot temperature, yeah. Which, I don't know. I don't know if dynamite could do that, and I don't think a radiologist is going to know either. Nor anybody who investigated this, because they didn't look into the damn dynamite shack.
It honestly seems like Lonnie is the only one that thinks that it was a dynamite shack. Oh, wait, or did someone else say it was? It came up again.
It did come up again. I can't remember who said it, though.
I can't remember either. We can't rewind this. Listen, I could go back and read, but I don't feel like moving my finger a little bit to go back. Okay, object speed and acceleration. According to Stanford's reconstruction of the event from on-site interviews with Zamora, the time was probably no more than 20 seconds from when the object went to silent operation, rapidly accelerated towards at the base of the nearby mountains? Maybe that's a mill. And then rose rapidly, a distance of about 2 miles. Assuming constant acceleration, these numbers can be used to estimate the object's acceleration, average speed, and final speed. I hope someone this is not their area of expertise was doing this. Maybe the radiologist. She seems to do things that do
She
not
does like to
concern
offer
her.
up advice.
Yeah. Assuming constant acceleration, the acceleration would be given by 2d2t, where the d is the distance of 2 miles. Oh my god, I have to read this to you guys. I mean, I don't. I put it in here. Or about 3,200 meters. The final speed would be This works out to here we go. Here's what I'm looking for. This works out to a final speed of 720 miles per hour, an average speed of 360 miles per hour, and an acceleration of 60 meters per second squared, or about 1.7 times Earth gravity of 9.8 meters per second. Okay, they had me at 720 miles per hour. That seems like a high number. I don't know about the other ones. Maybe they're high, but 720 miles for sure, that's high. These high values rule out many conventional explanations, such as a helicopter or balloon. A high-performance jet aircraft or rocket propulsion could conceivably produce the acceleration and near supersonic speed, but neither forms of propulsion are silent. The Air Force report on the incident also said...
But it wasn't silent. It roared.
It roared when it was taking off.
Okay.
There was a point where it should have been making noise and it wasn't.
They're also just going off of, like, to come up with a precise speed. They have to, like, assume that he was very precise in his measurement of this entire thing taking place.
Don't know. In this recreation, they just say that they've recreated it based on what he said. So I don't know how they're calculating that at all. So yeah, I mean, that gives them a rough estimate of 720 miles per hour. That's the one I'm going by because it's the only one that I know.
But you think they give, like, a range, not just, like, this exact speed? Because I don't think he says, like, exactly that amount of time.
No, he said
does,
specifically he didn't know.
Yeah.
It could have been this, but he didn't know. No missing time, by the way. A high-performance jet aircraft or rocket propulsion could conceivably produce the acceleration or near supersonic speed, but neither forms of propulsion are silent. The Air Force report on the incident also said that they analyzed the soil and found no evidence of chemical propellants, as might be expected from a jet or most rocket engines. Further, no contemporary craft was capable of vertical takeoff and such high speeds. Really? The oval object described by Zamora also lacked any wings or other external structures that might have provided lift. What year was this again?
Like 64, somewhere in there.
Isn't that how, like, spacecraft took off?
They did, but they went straight up. That's it. This one goes up and then moves horizontally.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was missing that. Okay, are you ready for it? The last point. Hoax claims and rebuttals.
Okay.
Some debunkers suggest that the affair was a hoax. Harvard astronomer Donald Menzel first suggested that Zamora had been the victim of a complex prank engineered by high school students who planned the whole business to get Zamora.
Oh, I like that.
Hynek suggested this to some Socorro citizens who discounted the idea. Years later, Menzel argued that Zamora had misidentified a dust devil. Wow. Menzel doesn't think much of Zamora.
Why is nobody saying Dynamite Shack? Misidentified a Dynamite
No, it
Shack.
never comes up again. Journalist and prominent UFO skeptic Philip J. Klass first suggested that the Zamora sighting was due to misidentified ball lightning. I love the ball lightning when they throw that around. When this debunking was itself debunked, notably by atmospheric physicist Dr. James E. McDonald, Klass switched gears and suggested that Zamora, we gotta do an episode on Klass, suggested the Zamora sighting was part of a scheme Zamora had invented with Socorro's then mayor, Holm Bursoom Jr., to attract tourism, claiming Bursoom owned the land where Zamora's encounter occurred. In fact, Bursoom didn't even own the property as Klass claimed. Klass nevertheless claimed that Bursoom hoped Zamora's fabricated UFO story would lure tourists to Socorro, and Bursoom could then develop the UFO landing site into a tourist attraction. Both Bursoom and Zamora consistently denied these accusations as ridiculous, and landing site was never developed, even after Zamora's sighting gained national publicity. UFO skeptic Stuart Campbell dismissed the hoax allegations of Klass. He has suggested that Zamora's sighting was almost certainly a mirage of cannabis. As of 2009, the landing site reportedly remains much as it was in 1964. Those are the debunking things. I hear the high school one, I think, more than anything. Zamora,
I just like to picture it as like a movie coming right around like the, what's the name? Animal House movie coming out. Because that's like, what, late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah, it would be.
I feel like somebody was watching that and said, these kids probably did that too.
Yeah. Zamora became so tired of the subject that he eventually avoided both ufologists and the Air Force, taking a job managing a gasoline station. He dies November 2nd, 2009 in Socorro from a heart attack. He was 76 years old. The event and its body of evidence is sometimes deemed one of the best documented yet most perplexing UFO reports. Quote from J. Allen Hynek, "There is no doubt that Lonnie Zamora saw an object which left quite an impression on him. There is also no question about Zamora's reliability. He's a serious police officer, a pillar of his church, and a man well versed in recognizing airborne vehicles in his area. He is puzzled by what he saw, and frankly, so are we. This is the best documented case on record, and still we have been unable, in spite of thorough investigation, to find the vehicle."
What in his background made us believe that he was capable of identifying things in the air? Just that he was a police officer?
Yeah, maybe he just had a hobby of it.
Okay, because he for sure thought it was a exploded dynamite shack.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. If you see to me, if you see flames in the air near where you know there's a dynamite shack, maybe that's what you think it is. Just not knowing anything else. That might be my first thought, but I'm just going to finish this out and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
This is the best documented case on record, and still we have been unable, in spite of thorough investigation, to find the vehicle or other stimulus that scared Zamora to the point of panic. The end. I can't say that, if I was driving past like a TNT plant or something like that and I saw fire flying through the air, I'd be like, that TNT plant at it again for the first time. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe he's never seen a TNT shack blow up. He doesn't know what it's like.
That's true, but at the same time, nobody ever seems to look into it at all, despite the fact that people even go out to the site where this happened.
No, it doesn't seem to be that anybody even looked at it to be like, did it actually blow up?
Or maybe it has something to do with everything that was going on here.
Is the dynamite okay? Is it not okay? Maybe the dynamite's gone. Maybe it exploded years ago.
Maybe they were packing dynamite into its casing or something like that and had an incident. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe the Mothman took it over, because we all know that they like TNT plants. So maybe it was a Mothman.
Because they never looked into the dynamite shack, we're going to have to say that's just as plausible as anything else.
Probably is. They do have red eyes, and sometimes they look like flames.
But I'm just going to chalk this one up once again to the investigators not having the keen insight or direction that we would have in an investigation, and they missed the boat on being able to properly identify what was going on here because of it.
It did seem to center solely on that idea at first, didn't it?
Yeah, and then they just move on. Okay, whatever. That can fuck right off. Let's talk about just the spaceship itself. That's it. Yeah.
Even though it was close by.
And he thought it was involved. Anyhow, that's my thoughts on it. I've really been stuck with that.
I could see why. My thoughts are, I don't know, the Lonnie Zamora one is, even in Blue Book, it's marked as a mystery. But to me, it has just two regular Earth elements in it for it to be supernatural in nature. And by supernatural, I mean unearthly?
I don't know if we can even classify that as unearthly, though. Like, that's the weird part. Yeah, the thing's flying fast. Not that fast. It's making noises, which is unordinary. We don't see any occupants of it. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem that weird.
I love how before it's taking off and it's making banging sounds.
No, like car doors closing twice.
For the FBI and the Air Force to have been on the scene so quickly, also, that makes me think that it was probably something to do with them. Or it had to have been, or even if it was, it couldn't have been high school students with anything flying. Couldn't have been.
Yeah, but also if the FBI were involved, they were investigated, so they probably would have said something and it would have been redacted or classified.
It's true, high school students wouldn't have been able to get away with that. But at the same time, even if it was, they're close to an Air Force base, which would also explain why they came. But I just love that it was setting the like shrubbery on fire.
Yeah, and that would actually, it would be pretty hilarious in a tragic kind of way if there's like an entire subcategory that we could do of UFO fires started.
I wonder if there is. That is a topic for another episode. Could be a short one.
Could be a very short one. There are none.
See you next week. UFO starting fires. UFO glides above California wildfire.
Okay, that's not quite what we're
Flaming
thinking.
UFO over Canada. UFO on fire. Something out of this world.
But yeah, that speculation is probably best for us to do off this podcast. In any event, I have been Taylor. Here with Chelsea. We are Journey to the Fringe. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Journey to the Fringe. If you have liked what you have listened to, please like, share, subscribe, or follow, depending on what venue you are listening to us through. Also, please, if possible, leave a 5-star review, as that really helps us in the algorithms. Should you wish to interact with us, please check us out on your social media of choice. I bet you we are there. And if you really want to communicate with us and give us ideas for new episodes or tell us that we're wrong and terrible, either way, please send us an email at journeytothefringe@gmail.com. For now, I'll see you in the next episode.